Hey guys, are you almost done? Okay, hurry it up. Yes, hello, and we're back for a little more McRaney number 3 and the halo effect. Right. So, again, we don't know why tallness became correlated in people's minds with authority and leadership, and therefore why this effect rebounded on tall people and subtly, or maybe even in some cases unsubtly, changed their personalities on average to make them feel certain ways about things that was reflective of the confidence that others had. So, again, where did this pattern come from, right? Now, we can identify where the pattern in the tiny little minuscule little central nervous system of a butterfly came, so that it can recognize the very specific shape that certain of those flowers make, right? So that it can select which flower to go to. That pattern we can see, we can actually identify within the neurons, also of a lobster, interestingly enough. But in humans, where the neuronal networks are so much more complex, it's difficult to see how the brain is hijacked by tallness in others. We can only speculate, right? And it's important to recognize this. Were tall people better at physical tasks, like hunting or some other kind of useful task that hunter-gatherers valued? Perhaps. We do know that tallness and height is a measurement of health, and that one of the markers of health is genetic health, right? So that it could have been a way, a sort of a shorthand, like a shortcut to selecting someone for genetic health. We just don't know, right? But we do know that it's the case, and it relates to this broader sense in our culture, and it's almost a cliche, but it's worth talking about relative to the halo effect of the power of first impression. So, social psychologists, right, have analyzed this very, very closely, very, very closely, and they have indeed discovered that humans form impressions of one another very rapidly and before we even are consciously aware of it, right? And that these first impressions then, as you might expect from the stereotype, can be difficult to change, right? They tend to be more resilient in terms of how we perceive people than secondary or tertiary senses of one another, right? And so, it is difficult to change your first impression, and this can cause problems for us as individuals. So, one of the lessons of the halo effect is to be on the lookout for how first impressions can draw you in to a perspective or to a level of social trust with another individual that you might not want to grant if you were to objectively look at all of their behaviors, right? So we do need to think in terms of that. And yeah, so the next set of concerns that McRaney brings up is perhaps even more significant than height, right? So McRaney is talking about beauty and what is called beautiful. Now we have different terms for this in our culture. Beautiful is tend to be looked upon as like perhaps overly flowery or overly formal, and we prefer different terms, like cute or whatever, right? And cute is nice because it can be used for lots of different things. It's a nice, wide-ranging word within the English language. But for the purposes of how psychology works, we're just going to say that beautiful is this sort of the same thing that we might think of as like attractive, right? And so McRaney is going to point out that along with height, beauty, that is attractiveness, physical attractiveness in particular, is a wonderful area of study for social psychologists, because it's so easy to prove, right, that humans are a little bit superficial, right, that looks matter in terms of our evaluation of others. And this should come as no surprise to us. I'm sure we've all identified this tendency within ourselves, because it goes back to Sappho, to Plato, and Aristotle, and the early Greek thinkers who analyzed this particular capacity and cautioned against it because of its capacity to twist our reasoning and to kind of cause us to make bad decisions. We've all made a few of those. But the point here is that it's a mistake just to think in terms of, of human beings being superficial or shallow in terms of allowing beauty or attractiveness to determine how much they like another person, or how much they're going to grant them in the form of social trust. The point here is that the halo effect says that when we perceive someone as attractive, we tend to not only find them more appealing, which would make sense, right? Because we're all in part driven by appearance. That's sort of natural. But it's also that we have a tendency to extend our positive view of this person into other areas. So this is why the halo effect is called what it is, right? It's this idea that there is this halo of golden light, right, that not only causes someone to look pretty, to be more appealing, but that halo effect also extends into other areas of their personality and their behavior, and it causes us to view them differently, right? And so there is an interesting experiment done on teachers, on a teacher, where Nesbitt and others. Nesbitt's one of the most famous behavioral psychologists, experimental behavioral psychologists, and he conducted an interesting experiment by which he sought to demonstrate, right, that particular views, right, of one or more other individuals in certain kinds of positions can lead people to have very differing understandings of the teacher, right? Even though almost everything about the way that the class is taught and even what the teacher says is identical, because it's the same teacher, right? So in other words, just tweak a few things and the halo effect can start to come in and alter our perspective in a pretty dramatic and radical way, right? So there are several other different experiments mentioned in this chapter, and yeah, I would love it if you would, on your Moodle post, if you could select one of those that you find the most appealing and relate it to one of your own experiences where you've allowed the halo effect to overwhelm other ways of evaluating people, right? And we don't have to say that, there's this, very rational, cold, scrutinizing mind, and then there's this very flighty mind that's taken up very much with attractiveness. But it is true that I think all of us have made mistakes in our evaluation based on this particular effect. Now, to return to what we spoke to at the beginning, because I think this is very important, and it will be important going forward. And for those students who are writing essays, again, this is an important thing to think about in terms of final parts of your essay, when you are going to be kind of assessing the ideas and in terms of their impact on you, right? So, and this is the concept that eliminating the halo effect entirely is not really a desirable outcome, right? That humans respond to one another for a variety of different reasons. And our job, so to speak, as people in relationships and with friends, and even in a professional context or an educational context, isn't to constantly scrutinize and evaluate people trying to achieve some pure measure of objectivity in how we view them. Which is to say that it's fine to let the halo effect do its thing and to allow you to prefer some people to others and to be more interested in certain people than in other people. It makes perfect sense. And we, in fact, need some form of guiding our preferences because it helps us to foster stronger connections and gives us more material. That being said, there are some general rules that flow from identifying the halo effect in your everyday life, right? And one of the first ones is don't assume that someone is flawless ever, right? Understand whether they're a religious leader or a parental figure or a child. And my children are in no danger of this from me, although I do love the little scamps. But pedestals are harmful. They're particularly harmful, and they can allow people who have a halo effect related to celebrity or authority to commit or professional access to commit abuses, right? So some of the most famous cases within the Me Too movement came from producers in Hollywood and sometimes other powerful people who had an aura of power that allowed them to behave in ways that were completely socially unacceptable and indeed illegal, abusive, and violent. And so, this is where the halo effect can have very serious harm, right, on interpersonal relations. So pedestals are dangerous. They're dangerous for us, and they're dangerous for the people who get placed upon them, who feel that they can then act with impunity, that is, do whatever they want and not suffer the consequences. So that's when the halo effect is disturbing, right? And we need to watch out for it. In a maybe a serious way, some questions around this idea of privilege, as it's commonly called today, have emerged in relation to the halo effect. And there's been discussions about racial privilege, gender privilege, and other things. I think this debate is not really within the scope of this class. I do think, though, that it's possible to understand that some people may get the benefit of the doubt more than others. I don't know if you have had siblings or been around siblings before, but unfortunately, it tends to be true that individuals who should be treated more egalitarian than not, because of certain factors, one or more of these individuals find a way to not be completely favored exactly, but to get a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt than others, right? And that small edge that we now refer to as privilege, yes, it can be damaging. Can it also be overblown as a topic? I think that's also true too. So, we just have to be on our guard for, giving some individuals a little too much leeway, because again, as we said about pedestals, it can be harmful to both parties, both the individual and the group, right? Finally, right, we really don't want to hold each other to some kind of cold, calculating scrutiny all the time. And sometimes it is important to let our instincts guide us in our interactions with one another. It is also important, however, to be aware of the halo effect and to identify areas when it starts to tip over into the unfair or even potentially dangerous territory. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and it was nice talking this through with you. Okay, take care.